Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and all things came to be through him, and without him nothing came into being. What came to be through him was life, and this life was the light of the human race, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. A man named John was sent from God. He came for testimony, to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was come into the world. He was in the world, and the world came to be through him, but the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, but his own people did not accept him. But to those who did accept him, he gave power to become children of God, and to those who believe in his name, who were born not by natural generation or by human choice, nor by man's decision, but of God. And the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us, and we saw his glory. The glory as of the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, saying, "This was he of whom I spoke, the one who is coming after me and ranks ahead of me, because he existed before me. From his fullness we have all received grace in place of grace. Because while the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. The only Son, God, who is at the Father's side, has revealed him." The Gospel of the Lord. It's interesting that each year we use this Gospel from St. John, the prelude to his Gospel, as the message for Christmas morning. It's full of all of the theological experiences. Before that, the readings for last night, midnight, and yesterday evening were the historical facts, the DNA, the history about his family, his heritage, and then how the birth came about. But today we have the very intense theological understanding, the mystery that Jesus came into the world, and yet he was creator of the world. He came to be one like us in all things but sin. And he is the light of the world, and to all who desire power and grace and love, he gives that grace and that ability. To those who do not, they don't experience it. But it's a pretty intense and powerful mystery. And the first reading, that beautiful reading from the prophet Isaiah, "How beautiful on the mountain are the feet of the one who brings good news." John the Baptist was that one. And all of us share in that mission and ministry of John the Baptist. So Merry Christmas. Thank you. Convince me. Merry Christmas. Christmas is an amazing time of the year when we look at it. It tends to bring out so many aspects of our own lives. It brings them into great focus. And yet Christmas is such a paradox. You know, the very wonderful experience of giving and receiving, shopping and trying to pick out the perfect gift for that person we care about. The wonderful carols you hear playing in the mall and on the airwaves. And yet, it is one of the most stressful periods in the year for most people. It's amazing. And it's a particularly difficult and challenging time for those who have lost a loved one, because it seems to just magnify that experience of loss for them. But maybe it becomes the stressful period of the year because of the layers of experience that we are moving through in dealing with Christmas. There are many layers involved. In the midst of all of the layers, we are expected to attend a variety of Christmas events. You know, depictions of the Christmas story, Christmas on Ice, the ballet, the school pageant, Christmas parties galore, and you're expected to show up for work every day as well, right? And so it's not surprising that when it comes to Christmas Day, you'll hear people say, "I'm exhausted." This is exhausting. And that is not a great surprise, because essentially since Halloween, and most especially since Black Friday, you have been in a kind of overdrive. It's just moving and moving and moving and trying to fit everything in. So it's not surprising that people say, "I'm exhausted." The layers of Christmas are many indeed, but among them are the consumer Christmas, from which really there's no escape in our world. Such an integral part. Beginning, back in November, Halloween, they're pulling out all of the Christmas fare, and it's a pretty intense experience. The Christmas carols, Santa Claus, reindeer, sleighs and sleds, and all of the wonderful aggressive merchandising. If you don't have this, you're not really it. You know, if you don't get a hold of this, then you're out of touch. And then that is the consumer Christmas. And then you have the Charles Dickens kind of Christmas layer. That is the sending out of Christmas cards and receiving Christmas cards and greetings. And there's a great hopefulness in that, remembering some people that perhaps we've forgotten about. And as you go through your list of people, you think, "Oh, do I need to send them a card? I love them," and the relationship has kind of drifted over a period of time. And all those beautiful cards depicting snowy scenes and roaring fires and turkey and ham and plum pudding and mince pies. And then it is also the Dickens part, the family get-togethers. The family get-togethers with goodwill and philanthropy and expansiveness and kind of a generosity that we don't maybe experience throughout the rest of the year because we don't have the focus on it. And all of these values are good and indeed helpful. But the third level would be the level of the crib or the manger, which depicts really what Christmas is about for us. The school nativity play, which reenacts the Christmas story, and it never fails in its power. We had our Early Learning Center pageant a little over 2 weeks ago, just wonderfully powerful. Simplicity and a little confusion, you know, and the teacher saying, "Hey, it's you, get up, you know, it's your line." And, you know, a variety of prompting, hey, missing cues, and maybe a little scrap between the shepherds and the angels, and a pushing and juggling for space and being in there and fitting in. And it's also wonderful and yet powerful, because it so simply and wonderfully and imaginatively reminds us of the story, and we smile and we enjoy and appreciate it because it's very profound. And with young kids telling that story again and again, it never gets old. It never loses its luster, because it's a story about an immigrant couple who were with child. And they were reporting to the father's birthplace. to register in accord with this new census that had been decreed by Caesar Augustus, the first census of its type. And they had each family to go to their own hometown or the hometown of the father to register there. And here are this young couple making that journey. Do you think for a moment that God was not using Caesar Augustus to bring about his eternal plan? Of course he was. It was all promise from the Old Testament experience. It was the truth, and now it is coming into full view. Augustus may not have been aware of that, but there are many things that we don't understand either in this journey. But he is bringing his plan to fulfillment. For us, as we live our own lives, there are many things that we often refer to as a coincidence. We say, wow, wasn't that a coincidence? Who is the Who is the cooperator in that instance? Guess who? It's him. Really, as we look back in our lives, and when he blesses us and helps us to see, we look back in our lives, it wasn't a coincidence at all. It was no coincidence that Augustus decreed this census to be taken up. It was all movement toward the fulfillment of God's plan. And as we look back in life, when he blesses us and helps us to see, we say, you know what? That really wasn't a coincidence. That was a God incidence. That was him bringing about his plan. He does it every day of the week. How many God incidences are you aware of in your life? This is a great way that we get to know him, get to understand him. Imagine, for example, becoming aware of him when you have something dire or something really difficult happening in your life. You're in a real crisis and you're out of sorts and distressed, and then all of a sudden you've prayed and you've asked the Lord to intervene, and you feel a calm in the midst of that storm. Or you feel a sense of his comfort and his peace. It was a God incidence. It's such an integral part of our journey, and it certainly was an integral part of this couple's journey. Can you imagine making their way, she with child, and traveling from Nazareth to Bethlehem so that the promise could be fulfilled? Out of Bethlehem comes my child. What a journey. It's almost 100 miles. 92, 93 miles. How many breaks did they have to take along the way? What fear and worry with so many people traveling the roads, and she on the back of a donkey and he walking most of the way. But we can easily spiritualize it away and think, well, they had some kind of hotline to God or something. They had the very same line that we have. But obviously they were so intent. Imagine the hope, the faith, the patience that this journey required on their part. It must have been monumental. And all of the questions, hey God, show us a sign, give us a break. And they arrive eventually at their destination and no room for them in the inn. Come on, God. Couldn't you give us a little spot for your son to be born? And all of the while his plan was unfolding. Why did he allow him to be born in a stable? There was no room in the inn. Was it perhaps a foreboding of what was to come in his life? There was no room for him in the inn of his people. There was no room within among his people. That's why he died the death of a common criminal in our world. It wasn't just a matter of no room in the inn. There was no room within among his own people. the mystery and the plan unfolding. And Mary all of the while being the consummate mother, wrapping him in swaddling clothes, laying him in a manger, and how her love and care was reflecting the love of God. That's our story. It's an amazing story, and that's our story. That was their story. But it's not unusual when we come to the Christmas event to hear preachers like myself condemning and saying, oh, all that commercialism, we got to get rid of it, and we got to get rid of all of the other stuff. It's Jesus is the reason for the season. That's true. That's true, but we don't wipe out all of the other aspects because they all have merits, and they're an insight into our lives. When we fight all of the shopping challenges and the immense crowds and the traffic going out to purchase the right gift for the right person and all of those things, and it can be very frustrating, can be very demanding, distressing, fighting through the crowds and the traffic and everything else. And yet the one thing we need to remember, it's about love. It's about love. And I don't need to become angry or distressed or out of sorts in the circumstances. And yet it's, as we look at it very carefully, it's a little microcosm of our lives. Don't we experience the same from one end of the year to the other? How easily things get out of sorts. How easily things get frustrating and distressing when I'm only trying to do the best I can. And it seems like the goodness and the energy is drawn out of us. Imagine if I were able to focus, to integrate my focus and to really ask myself the fundamental question, what is this all about? What are all of these things that I am doing? What are they about? What is the purpose? Imagine how it would change my perspective on all of these things. What is the purpose? Why do I do all of these things? And move through such distress and anger and frustration and disappointment and distress. What's the purpose? We are offering Alpha in the new year as a powerful opportunity to explore these wonderful questions for people. Questions like, what is the purpose of my life? What really guides my life? Do I have a plan? Or do I just move from pillar to post? How is that plan integrated? What am I really about? How may I continue to grow? Does my life have sufficient reflection, meditation? To align myself with His purposes and His plan. That's what this couple was about. They had the same myriad questions that you and I have. Imagine, for example, as we approach the Christmas season, if we were to give a little more time to ourselves, knowing that when we go out there's going to be immense traffic and there's going to be immense queues and the possible frustration that we might engender because of that. Imagine if ahead of time we decided to go earlier to allow some time knowing that that is going to happen. Imagine how much easier it would be. Managing the queues and managing the experience, simply because I'm not just continuing to rush through everything. That wonderful reflection by the Christophers, that age-old adage, better light a candle than to curse the darkness. Well, I can only light a candle if I have a candle with me. And the candle is the planning ahead. Knowing that I'm going out into the world, whether it's at work, or whether it's Christmas shopping, or whether it's family systems, I know there are things that will frustrate me about the experience, about the journey. But planning ahead, makes a huge difference. Better to light a candle. I light a candle when I have a plan ahead of time and I don't just walk myself into the same thing and experience the same things day after day and year after year and throughout the course of my year. When I come upon circumstances without a plan, that's when I am robbed of my goodness, my goodwill. And the message is peace and goodwill to all his people. The Christmas message, and it comes only as a result of a plan. We look at them carefully. They had a plan all the way to follow, and while they would have had distress and questions and worry and anxiety, it all came about because his eternal plan was coming to fulfillment. Do I have a plan? How does it connect with his plan? And it does make all the difference in the world. What is my plan? Merry Christmas. Thank you.